The gentleman reserved. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, you heard the passion of my friend from Massachusetts, and I have had an opportunity to work with him on the Rules Committee for 7 years now, and I can tell you that every bit of that passion is sincere. So often, I think folks turn on C-SPAN, they look at a group of politicians talking, and they think it's all for the cameras and it's all for show. And I will tell you that while I sometimes have that same suspicion when I turn on a program with folks I don't know, with folks I do know, I can tell you that that passion is sincere. What I can also tell you is that many of those concerns are misguided, and I think that's important. What happens here in this institution matters, and our ability to have that debate with one another matters. And the truth is, as you know, Mr. Speaker, most of that debate doesn't happen here on the House floor. My friend from Massachusetts and I are here today because it's time to vote. We're here to bring the rule. We're here to bring the substitutes. We're here over the next 2 days to vote. But the conversation has gone on not for a day, not for a week, not for a month, but for the better part of this year on what the budget is going to look like. I happen to have a copy of the budget report right here, Mr. Speaker. It captures all the votes we've taken, it captures all the debate we've had, and it captures what the intent of the institution is. Now again, we're going to have a choice of which budget we want to support. If you think taxes are too low, you can vote to raise taxes. If you think taxes are much too low, you can vote to raise taxes a whole lot. If you think the tax code as it exists today is a ridiculous compilation of confusing provisions stitched together by a patchwork of Congresses over the last 40 years, you can vote for fundamental reform. If you're tired of the fact that America used to be #1 in the world in terms of tax competitiveness, and now we're at the bottom of the list, and you want to take America back to being #1, you can vote for that too. I happen to put myself in that category. But I want to read, if I may, Mr. Speaker, from the budget report. The fact is, I can't. I imagined myself a younger man when I grabbed that report. If I can now read from the budget report. The resolution's reconciliation instructions, that's what's in the budget, Mr. Speaker. That's what allows us to take a tax package from the House to the Senate. You've heard about how the Senate's having a tough time getting anything done because it requires a supermajority. It requires 60 votes. Through reconciliation, you can get things done with less than 60 votes. That's how the Affordable Care Act was passed with less than 60 votes. You can get the tax bill passed with less than 60 votes. It says this. The resolution's reconciliation instructions that the Committee on Ways and Means will develop will be a comprehensive deficit-neutral tax reform legislation and report such legislative language to the Committee on the Budget. Deficit-neutral. Deficit-neutral. Nobody wants to blow a hole in the budget, Mr. Speaker. What the discussion is can we do better than today's tax code? And candidly, Mr. Speaker, if any member of this body wants to take the position that we can't do any better, the IRS is as good as it can be in implementing the American tax code today. The tax code that's twice as long as the Bible is absolutely as concise and succinct as it can possibly be. Those Americans who spend dozens of hours, even dozens of days, even dozens of weeks trying to put together their taxes, that's just the best we can do. Mr. Speaker, I've seen it happen. Sometimes folks throw their hands up and think we can't do any better. Not me, not today. We can all agree that we can do better than what we're doing today. Passage of this budget gives us that opportunity. You heard my friend from Massachusetts speak from the heart, Mr. Speaker, about the ability we have as a government to care for one another. Now, I would tell you that responsibility isn't uniquely a government responsibility. I'd say it's a faith responsibility, it's a family responsibility, it's a community responsibility. It's a responsibility that begins at home. It doesn't begin here, it begins at home, but it is a sincere responsibility. It's one that we want to do better at every day. I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Speaker, the labor force participation rate in America is the lowest it's been since the president from my great state of Georgia, Jimmy Carter, was in office. The labor force participation rate. There's not a one of us in this body that can drive down the street without seeing a help wanted sign. There's not a one of us in this body that can go out to a business without seeing someone asking folks to come in and help. And yet, Fewer Americans are working today than ever before. Why? A discussion of whether it's better to support people in poverty or lift folks out of poverty. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I would tell you we can support folks until we can lift them up, but that lifting them up must be our goal. Supporting them is not enough. You'll find it here, Mr. Speaker, in these pages. This is a vision document. This is what we're gathered together to do today, and we will have legitimate disagreements about when we're doing enough in a particular area and when we're doing too much. There are those in this body, Mr. Speaker, who believe passionately in education. I am one of those folks. I come from a district with amazing school systems. You can go to any public school in my district, Mr. Speaker, if you work hard and apply yourself. I don't care what your background is. I don't care where your family is from. I don't care what you have stacked against you. If you work hard and apply yourself in our public schools, you can be anything you want to be. I know everybody wants that for their constituency back home, and I have colleagues who believe that only Washington, D.C. is successful enough, has a track record of success strong enough to implement that vision back home. I don't come from that camp. I see a lot of failure come out of Washington, D.C. I see a lot of bureaucracy come out of Washington, D.C. I see success come out of parents and teachers and principals back home, raising taxes, supporting those institutions, making sure every child has a chance. We do that together as a community. The discussion that we might have in this institution, Mr. Speaker, is not do you believe in education, it's do you believe educators in Washington, D.C. have the best answers or educators back home in your district have the answers. Truth is, we don't have many educators in Washington, D.C. We have bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. who oversee educators. I side with my educators back home. It's a legitimate disagreement that we're welcome to have. What can't be said, though, Mr. Speaker, is that there are any disagreements over these next few days that we're not going to be allowed to have. I said it before, I'll say it again because it makes me so proud. We don't always have time or make room for all the voices in this institution, Mr. Speaker. You know, sometimes we pick and choose winners and losers, whose voice is going to be heard. Not today. Any member of Congress could submit their budget to the United States House of Representatives Committee on Rules. It's a hard thing to produce a budget. I told you I've done it before, Mr. Speaker. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of commitment. But if you believe that you have a better idea, you can do it. And if you did it, we made it in order in the Rules Committee last night, and we're going to debate it on the floor, and we're going to vote on it on the floor. We can't always say that every single idea, every single substitute is going to make it to the floor for a vote. We can say that today. I'm proud that we can. It's not going to stop the disagreements, Mr. Speaker, but what it is going to do is air those disagreements. What it is going to do is allow us to talk about our differing visions, and what it is going to do is allow us to come together on a common vision at the end of the day. I hope my colleagues will support this rule so we can begin that process, and I hope my colleagues will support the underlying budget of their choice. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record a letter from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in opposition to the Republican budget. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert a letter from the Coalition on Human Needs against the Republican budget. I would like to ask unanimous consent